Any thoughts on bringing Burger House to Norman? You're kind of responsible for that being a Dallas guy now.
That's a great question. I wish Burger House came to Norman. That'd be awesome.
We'll work on it.
Yeah.
I only ask great questions.
There they are, the two big guys, the two new guys there for Oklahoma. As we talked to Branson Hickman, had a good time with him today. Also had a good time with Domonic Williams. Welcome in, Soonerscoop.com practice report. This has begun. Day 2.
We are here.
George, hello, welcome.
Thanks. You're going to see me in a lot of the back of these videos.
Yeah,
so I appreciate you.
I know what you're doing. You're taking some
I know
notes
what
from
you're
somebody
doing.
else
You're
that usually does that.
First official visit here.
I have a lot more hair than him, but it was really good to get out there today.
Sure.
Got to talk to 4 guys. You mentioned it, Hickman and Damonic Williams, obviously 2 guys that, I spoke to them back in the spring when they first committed for stories then, but, haven't met them in person, got to kind of size them up and then also just kind of hear their thoughts on the team and being in Norman, and then also getting to hear from Nic Anderson and Peyton Bowen, 2 guys. I know Nic Anderson, this is his third year, in the program, but really 2 guys that are kind of going into their second year of being contributors. I thought it was really interesting hearing from those 2 too.
It's kind of interesting because you think about Peyton Bowen and you think about Nic Anderson as guys that are kind of veterans on this team. I mean, we had a lot of discussion about, what they've learned over the last couple years, and we'll get to them here in a second. But we got to start with Damonic Williams. Obviously, getting him out of the transfer portal from TCU was the biggest win out of the portal for Oklahoma. This past spring, obviously some of the guys were already here are going to be big-time players that we talked about on the top 5 storylines going into camp. But here we are, and we finally were able to talk to Damonic today, just in terms of, before we get to the video, just in terms of what he had told you. I mean, it kind of matched up. We knew that Mom was a big player in the recruitment and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be really kind of fun to see how he kind of ingratiates himself to the Oklahoma defensive line.
Yeah, it's really interesting because his story was obviously such a fascinating one, and we covered it, better than everybody here at Scoop. But hearing him kind of actually break it down today, kind of the behind the scenes of it, and talking about his mom, who obviously had a huge role in it, as well as his his handler, I guess,
mentor, whatever you want to call it, Cordell.
Hearing him talk about it, but also just now that he's finally here, what's it look like being in this defense, learning from Todd Bates? He talked a lot about Todd Bates and kind of, his mentorship and how he's helping him, prepare for what he hopes to be is a great season, and then, maybe go off to the NFL soon. So I thought that was interesting, and also just the confidence he has in this defense.
Sure.
You can tell that was a selling point for him. I think coming to Oklahoma was playing in this defense, playing with some of these guys like a Billy Bowman, a Danny Stutzman, a DJ Terry, who it sounds like they've become really close. So, and even talking about David Stone and Jaden Jackson, I thought that was some interesting stuff. So it sounds like he has fit in really well so far in Norman.
It's kind of interesting. Both Billy Bowman said it on Thursday as well as Damonic Williams. I mean, and whether it's a reality or not, the goal is for them to be the #1 team or the #1 defense in the country.
Yep.
It's a good starting point. Who knows what that's going to come together? But as we've talked about, on many shows here over the last however many months since the end of the season, or since we found out that all of these guys were returning on the defensive side of the ball, expectations are extremely high going into this season. And on the flip side of it, you have a Branson Hickman who might be Oklahoma's, I don't want to say savior, but he came at the right time for Oklahoma at a center position where, whether Troy Everett's going to be ready for the beginning of the season or not, Branson Hickman might end up being the guy regardless.
It's funny because you say Damonic Williams was the biggest win for Oklahoma in the portal, and that's true, but I think that maybe Branson Hickman was more necessary. When you look at that position and where they were at, I mean, Troy Everett, it still sounds like he's not going to be able to go until, maybe early in the season. You've got Josh Bates, who you like his potential, and I think he had a really solid spring, and it sounds like he's still maybe mixing in a little bit with the first team. You need somebody like a Branson Hickman who has 33 career starts under his belt, somebody that, he's not the biggest guy. You and I both noticed that today talking to him and standing next to him. But I think he's really consistent. You know what you're going to get. He's a really smart guy. You'll hear from him here in a second, and you can just tell the guy gets football. And I can see how him and Bill Beatenbow really connect.
Let's hear from the new Sooners, Damonic Williams, as well as Branson Hickman, talking about their journey and landing in Norman.
Actually, on my first official visit here, it was my first visit here. My mom was like, at the end of the visit, she was like, either you're going and I'm going with you, or I'm just going to go by myself. So that was kind of already a deciding factor.
What was it that stood out?
For my mom, it was a family-oriented environment, and for me, it was the same thing, but also what I could do in this defense. It's been great. It's been amazing. I feel like out of all the head coaches I met, VB, he's probably most definitely the best one, because he's just such a hands-on coach and not like a CEO-minded head coach where they're just watching practice. Like, no, he's getting in practice. He's gonna be chewing people out if they're doing the wrong thing, and it's something that I love about this place.
What is it specifically about the defense that attracted you?
It was based on his coaching, and then knowing that VB, he's not going to let me down either as a head coach. And knowing I have him in my back pocket, and Coach Bates, I have him in my back pocket as well.
It's awesome. You know, I've played in this stadium before. I wanted to come to a school that was big and play in a big environment in the SEC, and OU's close to home, so I couldn't be more excited. It was really hard because, I mean, I have a lot of friends at SMU. I respect the coaches at SMU. It was a really tough decision, but I felt like it's what I needed to do for myself just to get a new experience. Yeah, Coach B's one of the main reasons why I came here. Obviously, he has a proven track record. He puts guys in the NFL, and he also has guys succeed in college. So, I mean, it's like, why would you not come play for Coach B?
It might just be a sign of the times, but Branson Hickman and Damonic Williams have a unique relationship. Obviously playing in the, the Skillet rivalry down in the DFW area with Damonic obviously over at TCU, Branson coming in from SMU. They each played in Norman as well at one point. Obviously Branson Hickman last year with the Mustangs in Norman in the second game of the season. But it is kind of interesting hearing them talk about one another. Obviously center and, a defensive tackle playing in the interior went up against each other quite a bit a season ago.
And not only, just a defensive tackle going up against, like he was a nose tackle.
Yeah,
so they were lined up like head to head, I think twice, because they played, I believe, back-to-back years against each other, and both were starters.
Right.
So, they're very familiar with each other. I thought it was funny. Both of them said that they hated each other before getting to Oklahoma, but it's just funny how those things end up. And I also thought it was interesting hearing them talk about, they both said it was so fun to play in this crowd in Norman, and I think it was Damonic Williams at one point was talking about he didn't realize that there was teams out there that sold out every single game.
Yeah.
And he's like, I had no idea that OU fans came and showed up to every single game like that, which I thought was interesting. And then obviously SMU, now they're, one of the Power 4, schools going to the ACC, but obviously a little bit bigger step up, in terms of playing at a place like Oklahoma. I thought it was interesting to hear him say how cool it was to be there. Now he's excited to have those people rooting for him.
Damonic also mentioned that, last year when TCU came to Norman, that there was a bunch of fans that were, not overly, welcoming to Norman, but those same people are going to be cheering for him come, Saturdays during the fall. Here is Damonic as well as Branson Hickman, kind of talking about, don't know about maybe a little bit of a rocky relationship going up against one another. And then also a little bit with Branson and Dom talking about the offensive line, which is obviously a very important storyline for Oklahoma here during the preseason.
It's good. I mean, me and Dom probably didn't like each other much back in the day, but now we're teammates, and we built a pretty good relationship in the summer, and it's good to go against a familiar face every day that's also a really good player. So
how good is he?
He's good. He's really strong. I mean, y'all probably seen that before. He's a big guy and strong, but also moves well. So he's a great guy to practice against every day for sure.
Oh, he's gonna be good. He's a very quick center, and he's very smart too. And once he get his power with his speed, he's a great center.
You played him last year. What was that like?
Can't lie, me and him, we hated each other. But I'm glad we're on the same team now. We get to go against each other in practice every day.
Yeah, I mean, I feel great. I mean, we got a lot of guys that are working really hard. We built a good relationship, good bond in the summer. A lot of guys hanging out together. Being a transfer, I'm thankful for the guys. Came in a little later than everyone else, and they brought me in like I was one of their own. So it's been a good experience so far and a good first 2 days.
Being an experienced guy and also playing that center position, have you kind of taken on a leadership role, or do you kind of have to grow into that in a new place?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you got to grow into it. You got to earn people's respect, but also, I mean, we have a lot of guys that played a lot of football. We have a lot of leaders. So, I mean, it's never good to have one guy leading the whole group. It's a lot of guys collective talking, getting the group going. So, I mean, I feel like that's what we have here, and that's what you want in an O-line room.
Dominic, the offensive line of this team is being talked about as a question mark. You go against them every day. Kind of talk about that group. And
they're going to be great. Yes, sir. Without a doubt. So all those doubts about our O-line, y'all can just stop that because I'm telling you, this defense and this offense is going to be something surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. No one will say it was going to be easy, but it helps going through summer together. I mean, Coach Smitty put us in a great position to work really hard and get together. We had guys host stuff on the weekends so that everyone could be around each other and just not just hang out when you're only in the facility. That's the biggest thing, is you got to be around each other outside the facility, build real bonds, not just, hey, we're double teaming this guy here. You gotta hang out together. So.
Boppers Billa wrote about Dominic Williams today. You wrote about Branson Hickman and kind of his journey to Norman. Good time to join Soonerscoop.com, by the way, for a special promo for you guys out there watching on YouTube, our loyal and faithful watchers of the YouTube. A really good deal, though. 2 months, $1. I mean, $1 for 2 months is a simple deal. All you got to do is go to Soonerscoop.com, promo code OU1, and you can read up on both of those stories.
There should be some good stuff coming soon. I know that we're starting to hear some rumblings out of camp that I'm sure we'll have some notes up on soon. So no better time than now, especially with, I mean, look, we're what, 29 days away? Insane. So we're gonna have a lot more interviews too coming soon.
It's unbelievable to think that somebody like a Peyton Bowen has just been here for a year now, and we would have to go all the way back, and I guess not all the way back, but go about a week and a half, 2 weeks back to SEC Media Day in a conversation that Billy Bowman had talking about just the talent that's in the Oklahoma secondary. Obviously, the former 5-star Peyton Bowen, he made an impact a year ago, but I think that when you're talking about how good he could be or what the ceiling is for him as a player at Oklahoma, he could end up being one of those guys that's talked about as the next great safety at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think we've all just sort of penciled him in as a starter in the secondary next to Billy Bowman. We'll see how that plays out. I think that's going to be somewhat of a competition, but I think it speaks to just how good he was last year in the small, spurts that we saw him. He was electric. I mean, it felt like every time he was in the game, he was going to make a play, whether that was an interception or batting a ball away or a blocked punt. And we'll talk about special teams in a second with him. But I think that he's just so smart, like his football IQ. But the one thing I also noticed about him today, Eddie, is he looks the part.
A little bit bigger, yeah.
I mean, he definitely, when he came in as a freshman, you could tell that he was still trying to work on his body, get physically ready. And I think last year you saw some of those bumps and bruises get to him throughout the season. I know talking to him today, it sounded like that's kind of his focus, is staying healthy and also just being a more physical player, working on his tackling, I think is something that he talked about, his angles and all of that. So he definitely feels more comfortable, it seems, in this defense. And it does seem like, look, we'll see if he's a starter or if he's just doing punt return and kick return too, or what it looks like. But he's certainly going to be a major contributor this year.
Let's go back to SEC Media Days. Here is Billy Bowman talking about Peyton Bowen.
Peyton Bowen, and I truly believe he has the ability to be more elite than I do. He has so much talent in the world. Once everything clicks for him and he kind of grows up more, maybe that'll happen once I'm gone next year. By him realizing, it's my time now. But he's definitely a guy I've taken under my wing. A great young guy, a great football player, obviously, and he's just continuing to grow.
Let's go to some numbers real quick and looking at what Peyton Bowen was able to do a year ago as a freshman. 13 games, 2 starts, 36 tackles, tackle for loss, had a sack, had the 5 pass breakups, blocked a punt. What was that in the opener?
Yeah, didn't he block 2?
Season? Was it 2 punts?
I think he might have blocked 2 punts.
I might have shorted you one, Peyton. That's my bad. That's my fault. I still love the Denton Geyer folks as well as Jackson Arnold. No big deal. But Billy Bowman as a freshman, 11 games, 7 starts, 22 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, as well as 2 pass breakups. Maybe a little bit hard to compare when you're just looking at the stats, but just in general, I would imagine just another year and being around Billy, and that's something that you asked that we'll see here in a second, it has to be a positive, right? We've talked about Danny being around the linebackers. We've talked about, obviously Dominic Williams kind of being taken under his wing by DeJoun Terry. It's a lot of positives when you're talking about guys, not just the impact that they're going to have on the field.
I think we talk so often about Danny and Billy and their impact just on the field by themselves, and we forget to talk about the impact they have on those around them, and not only just on the field and helping Peyton Bowen, but what is Peyton? I mean, Peyton Bowen's development is going to, be twice as good as it would be without, a Billy Bowman by his side, right? And I think that's the part that he's not just being thrown into the fire. He's being thrown into the fire with somebody that has seen it all, right, and has done exactly what Peyton's done. And so I think that that's going to help him in his career. And I think that Billy's not wrong. Like when you and Billy's a great player. I mean, one of the best safeties that Oklahoma's had in a long time. But when you look at Peyton's attributes, his athleticism, his size, like he's got all the tools to be, you know, one of those safeties that walks away as one of the best to come through this program, you know, maybe since a Roy Williams or something like that. Like that's the type of player that I think a lot of people believe Peyton Bowen can be. And so I think having somebody like Billy who's been through it all, like you said, you know, you read some of those numbers, and it's funny too because Billy Bowman was in a different defense then when he was a true freshman. It wasn't under Brent Venables. So I'm excited to see what kind of leap Peyton Bowen can take this year because, again, when you watched him last year, he was already so good. I mean, there was people arguing that he should have been starting at the end of the season. That's how good he was.
There was a couple of those 5 pass breakups a year ago that I think that we talked about it on the Eskridge Lexus postgame show. We talked about it on some of the instant reaction stuff here on the YouTube channel, just in terms of they haven't had a guy that's been able to break on the ball like that in a while.
No, they haven't. And I think that he's somebody that this year, he didn't have an interception last year, did he?
I don't think so. No.
I think he'll get his first this year. I feel
it's
very
a bold prediction, George.
I don't think it's bold at all. I think that he's going to have a really big season, and then his impact on special teams.
Sure.
You know, I think that he is somebody that's going to either be punt or kick return. It sounds like he wants to do both.
Yeah.
That's what he told me today. You know, during our little media session, and I think it was somebody joked about you know, if you're returning punts, you can't block punts, and he's like, well, I'll still have an impact.
Yeah.
It's just like that's just kind of the confidence that he has, because I do think that you put him back there, one, he'll be sure-handed, and two, I think he can make a lot of plays.
Let's hear from Peyton Bowen talking about you know, just being back around Billy, what he can learn from him going into this 2024 season, as well as maybe a possible safety mate in Woody Washington, who continues to kind of work in on the back end of Oklahoma's defense. It's going to be interesting, but here's Peyton Bowen.
How much does it help your development having a guy like Billy back that you can kind of lean on and learn from and play next to?
It's really great. I thought that he can teach me his ways, like be a leader, just what he sees on the field as well. Because, I mean, we don't have NFL guys in our locker room that can, besides coaches, that can tell me what they see by having a future draft pick right there by my side telling me what he sees, what I need to do better, even what he needs to work on. I can learn from him as well.
What have you seen from a guy like Woody Washington, who's kind of moving around, playing different positions? What have you seen from him so far?
It's really good that I've seen, like you said, the movement, just him being very resilient to that. Like he's taking it really well, playing all sorts of positions, and he's striving in them too. He's doing his thing. He's not like busting. Like he's a older guy, so he knows the playbook really well. So it's really easy for him to play all those different types of positions, just in case like something does happen. He can step in wherever, best 11.
You know, it's just flat out interesting because we've talked about how many guys they have back there, how many talented individuals could see the field here this season, especially early when you're getting through the non-conference stuff. But, you know, and you also kind of got to take a little bit of everything with a grain of salt, right? Because it is day 2 of practice. Yeah. They're moving guys around. It's just going to be kind of interesting to keep an eye on here over the next couple weeks, how they want to, you know, have that secondary look.
I think Woody Washington is one of the more interesting storylines this camp, just because he's a really good player. But where does he fit in? Because if they're going to move him from corner, which it does sound like he wants to move from corner, like that was part of the deal of him coming back, is he wanted to put some tape out there of him playing some safety, playing some slot corner, which is basically that cheetah or nickel position. And I think that's where he's been kind of working. I know he worked a lot of safety and nickel during the spring. I think that sounds like what he's maybe doing, this fall so far. And then how does that impact what happens at outside corner? So Woody's a really interesting case, because I think they're going to find ways to get him on the field, because he's just too good not to, and he's too good in coverage, especially man coverage, that he's somebody that they're going to want to have on the field. But you know, where exactly is that? I don't know. But they just have so many guys like a Peyton Bowen that is going to be able to step in and play really well this year.
So now we move into, kind of not the first week, because they're obviously not done with the first week, but we are now on the field with Zach Alley, obviously, who's here for the spring. But, maybe things are different this time around, just in terms of, you actually can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel with summer kind of closing and getting closer and closer to the start of the season. But Peyton Bowen had some interesting stuff to say about Zach Alley today.
I thought it was maybe one of the more interesting quotes from the day. And, you know, we talk a lot about on here, you know, the hiring of Zach Alley and how it kind of frees up Brent Venables to become more of this, you know, quote unquote CEO coach. And is he going to hand over the reins? And we heard him at the luncheon kind of say, you know, everybody's wondering, is it going to be Brent Venables' defense? Is it going to be Zach Alley's defense? You know, is it going to be a combination? And I do think it'll be some sort of combination because they basically run the same thing. But I think it, you know, hearing from the players, one in the spring talk about how Zach just kind of reinsures Brent's message, maybe in a different way, is really able to communicate him. But then Peyton Bowen kind of saying, yeah, like this has maybe taken some off of Brent, allowing him to do that. And I thought you made an interesting comment on our way back before we shot this, that he really trusts Zach Alley. And not that he didn't trust Ted Roof necessarily, but he wasn't exactly saying, all right, Ted, you got it. You're running it today. I'm going to go off and do this other thing. I think Brent, there's more of that now with Zach, where he's like, okay, you know what? Maybe I need to spend my time over here today with the specialists or, you know, the offense or whatever it may be, right? He knows that Zach's going to literally say the exact same things that he's saying to teach the defense.
Well, I mean, we've joked about it, and you'll hear from Peyton talking about it, but they are kind of the same person. They speak a very much the same language defensively. They know, you know, where things need to be because of the time they'd spent together. But it was interesting. Here is Peyton Bowen talking about Zach Alley and just kind of what he's seen here over the first couple of days of practice.
Oh, he's like a miniature V. Like, it's really interesting to see how they cooperate and how they do things. It's a very different vibe from last year, from the day he got in, and I can just see that he's a very smart young man, like young adult, my fault. But like, because he's not like super old. I'm not gonna call him old, but he's like, the way he just sees the game. It's so nice to have like that second guy. So like we can have Coach V down on one side, Coach Alley down on one side, and we can both be giving out the same intel that they have, just working together for so long.
Yeah, you kind of touched on that just now. What kind of impact have you seen on Brent or on Coach Venables having Coach Alley around?
I feel like it's a weight lifted off his shoulders a little bit. Like he has a little bit more, because he's been in his system for so long at Clemson that he just knows like exactly what he wants, and that's how Coach V is. Like he's a very to the T type of person, and so Coach Alley coming in gives him that kind of like a relief, I feel like.
The dynamic between those two on game day is going to be super interesting. Just watching from afar, like just watching the sidelines and how everything works out.
I'm curious to see if Alley's in the box.
That'll be interesting.
I don't think he will be. I think his time at Jacksonville State, he was on the sideline calling the defense. And so, that's not to say he's going to call the defense at OU. I think that, you know, Brent will still have a lot of say in what the calls are, but I do think he's somebody that you know, just from the small interactions we've seen him, he definitely is somebody that I think likes to be up close and personal with his players. And so I think that he'll end up being on the sideline, but you never know. But I think so. I think you're right, Eddie. It's going to be one of those things, those first few games, where we're going to be probably kind of watching him and see where he's at on the sideline compared to Brent. Like, is he right next to him? Is he a little bit, you know, further down the sideline? Like, where exactly is he?
I'm really trying not to bob my head because I know that people have gotten on my ass about that. So I'm like really conscious about it now. Yeah. I'm really paranoid about it as well. Last but not least, we talked to Nic Anderson today, and, you know, he is one of those guys that I feel like there's a lot of people, when you talk about Jaden Gibson, you talk about this entire wide receiver room, that it just feels like the maturation and this third season as, you know, Nic Anderson enters his third year in Norman, this could be the one. It feels like this is a big year ahead for Nic.
Well, it's crazy to say that because last year was such a big year. Like, I feel like we talk about all these guys.
To say that 31 receptions, 798 yards, and 10 touchdowns wasn't a big year, right?
It's like if he did that again this year, that would be amazing. Like, that would be, if you score 10 touchdowns in a season and have over 700 yards receiving, you're doing something right. So, like, I think it's interesting. Like, I don't think that we forget about Nic Anderson. I think we forget what he did. Like, I think we kind of maybe take it for granted at times. And he's a guy that I think also maybe other media take for granted, especially nationally. I mean, I still think that he probably should have been on one of the SEC teams. When you look at his statistics, they're as good as a lot of players that ended up making that. So, again, better than Deion Burks, who made the list. And that's not a slight at Deion Burks. I think Deion Burks is going to be a great player. But you can just tell, though, Eddie, talking to Nic, how much he's matured. He's very he gives you straight answers. Like there's no like rambling with Nic Anderson. Like he's very straightforward with you. And I think you can tell he's also just become that veteran leader. And not to say they don't have that guy in there. I think Jalil Farooq is obviously somebody that's a leader in that room. I think Andrel Anthony, he's been recovering from an injury, but he's a leader in that room. But other than that, it is kind of Nic Anderson, right? Like he's been in the program now 3 years alongside Jaden Gibson, and he talked about Jaden too, and is a guy that I think we both agree is going to have a big year. But it was good to hear from Nic. It sounds like he had a really good summer. I think he talked a lot about improving his speed as well as his cutting and things like that. I think he said he's 216 pounds. I don't know what he was playing at last year. I think that might be a couple pounds heavier than where he was a year ago. But, it was just good to hear from him. And again, like I said, he's not going to give you just an amazing quote, but just a solid dude that I think is, again, growing as he enters his third year.
When you talk about the leadership quality that he's kind of built, or it's, I guess, maybe even just become more comfortable, I think that it's almost reminiscent of what Billy Bowman went through this spring. And, being a participant in practice and stuff like that, but, he kind of took a back seat a little bit, kind of became a little bit of a coach. We had talked about that on one of the YouTube shows or some of the YouTube shows during the spring, and watching him out there working with some of the secondary. It kind of sounds like Nic went through a little bit of the same thing. Obviously didn't play in the red-white game, just held out, for, I think, precautionary reasons. I think he was nicked up at the time, but it does sound like his voice has become a little bit louder in that wide receiver room.
I would say he's probably the leader of that group right now. I mean, maybe Farooq, I think is probably, but he's, Farouk's a real quiet guy. And Nic isn't really a super vocal guy either, but I think his voice, carries a lot in that room, just because he's been here so long. Also, being the brother, I think, of Rodney, I think helps a little bit. And just his work ethic. He's a guy that I think we constantly hear about his work ethic. It sounds like he had a phenomenal summer, and he talked about that today, best summer that he's had. And he also said it's the hardest summer that they've been a part of as a team. So I thought that was really interesting. But, yeah, I think he's definitely stepped up and become a leader. And you look at that room, it's become a veteran group.
Sure.
I mean, across the board, when you talk about guys coming back like a Jalil Farooq and Andrel Anthony, and Nic Anderson and Jaden Gibson, I mean, those are 4 guys now that have been in the program at least a couple years, and some of them 3 or 4 years. I think they kind of know how this thing goes.
Here is Nic Anderson talking about the, it sounds like a big summer with Jerry Schmidt, as well as, I asked him, is there a sense of urgency this time of the year with the team that, obviously has high expectations going into a new journey, if you will, into the SEC? Here is Nic Anderson.
Off season for you. I know you didn't get to go through spring a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, the summer went really well for everybody. I mean, Schmitty got after us. I feel like this was the toughest summer that we've had since I've been here, and I feel like we all handled it really well. He broke us down and built us right back up, so I feel like this is the best shape the team has been in a while.
What made this summer more difficult than last summer?
I feel like just the standards were raised a little bit higher as they are every year, and we just felt like we need to push each other, not just ourselves, and I feel like we had a lot of leaders step up and push everyone to the next level. So I feel like that's what made this summer a little bit tougher.
How much different is this offense with Seth Littrell running it versus what you guys were doing with Jeff last year?
We have some of the same ideologies, but as a whole, like I said, fast, fearless, and physical. Just every play. When he wants to push it deep, he wants to push it deep. When he wants to run the ball, he wants to run the ball efficiently. So just whatever you can expect from a dominant offense is what he wants to put forward.
It's such a cliche line this time of the year that you guys only got like 15, 16, 17 practices to get ready. But is there maybe more of a sense of urgency right now than there has been in recent years with the move and making it bigger than it really is?
I mean, there's always a sense of urgency. 17 practices, 18, whatever, is really not enough. So we're just trying to make each practice as efficient as possible.
One common theme with all 4 guys that we talked to today, the beads of sweat just dripping down the side.
We were sweating. I was drenched by the time we left. We were only out there, 20 minutes?
It might have been the hottest day of the summer here in Norman today. So that's going to do it for today's practice report. Going to be a little bit of a scheduling item. Saturday, going to be talking to the head man, and they'll be 3 days into practice by then. It'll just kind of be interesting to get a good feel for not only some injury updates on some of the guys that have been out there, Andrel Anthony, Jalil Farooq, it sounds like might be doing a little bit, maybe more than I thought that they would be at this time.
That's a little bit of the rumor. We'll see. I think that they even put out a photo from the team account on Instagram of Jalil Farooq catching a pass. Again, I don't know how much teamwork they're doing. I'm sure they're out there running some routes and just trying to get their feet back underneath them.
Sure.
But, hearing about them, Troy Everett, I don't think is going through a whole lot. Desan McCullough, there's been some scuttlebutt about him maybe missing some time early in fall camp. So that'll be good. And I think just hearing, certain guys that, look, Brent this time of year is going to talk about probably everybody on the roster when we ask him a question, but there are certain guys that I would love to hear about, like I mentioned earlier, Woody Washington. Like, where exactly are they working him right now? Are they kind of playing him wherever? Peyton Bowen, Robert Spears-Jennings, two guys that we expect to play a lot more this year. Lewis Carter on defense, I think, is interesting. And then that offensive line. What does it look like? Where are the competitions? Is it across the board? Are there a couple guys that you already got slotted in? I think all those questions, I don't know if Brent will exactly answer them, but I think they will definitely be asked.
That's when we will talk to you again on Saturday after we talk to Brent Venables to get a little bit of a recap and his thoughts as Oklahoma opens up practice for the first week here to start, technically, I guess, the 2024 football season. I never know if this is like preseason or if it's actually camp season. We'll kind of work on that, I guess. And we'll also work on getting a burger house to Norman, America. Yes. Need Branson to come through for us. He's a DFW guy. He knows about it.
There's some spots on Campus Corner open.
For George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.